I will promise you this, that if we have not gotten our troops out by the time I am president, it is the first thing I will do. I will get our troops home. We will bring an end to this war. You can take that to the bank.
On Capitol Hill, resistance to U.S. militarism has all but collapsed. With no opposition whatsoever in the Senate and only 48 nay votes in the House, the Congress last week passed the biggest military budget since the end of World War II. Forget about Obama's phony rhetoric.
Yes,
the proof is in the numbers. The military budget firmly cements Barack Obama's place as the biggest pro-war president in 2 generations. Today, the United States, although it is the world's only superpower, spends almost as much as all of the rest of the world's militaries combined. The U.S. defense authorization for 2011 is $725 billion. China, with the second most expensive military machine on the planet, spends less than $80 billion a year. If Barack Obama lasts for 8 years in office, he is on track to spend $5 trillion on the Pentagon, significantly more than George Bush, who in turn spent a lot more than Ronald Reagan. But, as they say on the TV commercials, that's not all. The defense budget doesn't include expenditures for Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs, nuclear weapons work at the Department of Energy, military aid to other countries through the Department of State, NASA space programs that are really military projects, and the interest payments on past military expenditures that were financed by debt. Inclusion of those hidden costs of war would bring military-related spending to well over $1 trillion a year and rising all the time. In real dollars, the U.S. is spending far more on the military than at any time during the Cold War, when there was another superpower in competition, and more than President Lyndon Johnson spent at the height of the Vietnam War. Obama is not merely a continuation of the Bush administration's war policies. He has accelerated the descent into a war economy.
Remember this back here. Protesters slamming then President Bush for taking military action in the Middle East. Where are those protesters now?
Well, they're not protesting. Why? Because their sons and daughters aren't fighting these 5 undeclared wars that President Obama is fighting. They don't really care. They don't have any
But doesn't he
stake in
flip it
those
around by
things.
saying what I'm doing is humanitarian? It's not just being a bully like the evil Bush.
Well, I mean, that's his justification. I'm not sure how many times you buy it when you're now up to 5 wars with, you know, talk about maybe even a 6th. I mean, we're in Afghanistan. Pakistan, according to Leon Panetta this morning, said we're at war with Pakistan. We're already in Iraq. We've now done Libya. We're doing Yemen quietly, and who knows about Syria. So that's 5 undeclared wars with no particular goal. I think that's
What is the goal? The idea is to just, if we see people being picked on and abused and killed, and shot, we're going to come to their defense. But that is a slippery slope, is it not?
If you want to be in the middle of everybody's civil war, I can give you 10 countries we could be at war with by the end of the month. I mean, Syria, more people have died in Syria than in Libya.
America, it is time to start bringing our troops home. It's time to admit that no amount of American lives can resolve the political disagreement that lies at the heart of someone else's civil war. That's why I have a plan that will bring our combat troops home by March of 2008.
But I am saying about this, if this were George Bush expanding to 5 wars with the potential of 6,
you would be talking about impeachment. You know, look at the War Powers Act. The War Powers Resolution passed in 1973 was done in order to do just this sort of thing that we're talking about. It was to prevent Nixon, who went into Cambodia and Laos while we were in Vietnam, to get those safe havens. That was what this act was designed to do. President Obama has just blown right past the War Powers Resolution. He says, well, it doesn't apply to me. Why should I have to obey it?
I wanted to draw a picture that describes effectively the false left-right paradigm. The Republican Party props up the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party props up the Republican Party. By itself, a single-party system will fall over. But if you take the 2-party systems and you lean them up against each other, this is basically the arch. Their force going together keeps them together and makes it become a very strong, stable platform on which they can build their hierarchical New World Order system. So the current two-party system has been dominated and bought up and controlled by the elite that sits atop it. Now, the elite with a one-party system would not be balanced on top of one party. They would be subject to being toppled. But you put the two parties up against each other, they form a royal arch. And now it's very hard to separate those two because they're leaning up against each other. And so Republicans attack Barack Obama. And then the Democrats attack John McCain. And then the population who's down here is trained to see John McCain as representing them personally, as being their daddy, of where their personal power comes from, of their camp, their brand name, their brand of soda. And so this is a controlled paradigm. And really, it's one unit supporting themselves and containing revolution, so that the people who are down here never learn that there is a world outside of this controlled paradigm. We are locked within the left-right paradigm, and then it becomes this huge pageant, this huge distraction where we analyze every facet of the two political parties, never realizing they themselves are simply a front or puppets for a larger power structure. And then they can limit the scope of differences, which, if you look at it, there's almost no difference between the two, instead of getting the people to look outside the box at the wider world.
What I do oppose is a dumb war.
And I know that you are one who also argues that this war is illegal. The White House says otherwise. Prove the White House wrong.
Well, the White House doesn't make the arguments that many of its supporters make. The argument it made in its report to Congress yesterday was that the War Powers Act does not apply, much less the Constitution, because this is neither a war nor hostilities. This is something else. This is a military operation that doesn't rise to the level of hostilities, which is absolutely absurd. The War Powers Act was written in 1973 very intentionally and clearly to encompass all military engagements, including imminent threats of hostilities and anything amounting to hostilities. Congressman Dennis Kucinich was debating a former lawyer from the Reagan White House who was defending Obama, and he asked this guy twice, never got an answer, if there were 2,000 missions over the United States by a foreign nation and many of them were dropping bombs, would that be war? Would that be hostilities?
Right. Well, that's something I want to ask you, David, because even if, you say that it doesn't even matter what the U.S.'s engagement is, that this would be illegal. But what about their argument that the U.S. is in a support role and that they're not engaged in hostilities? Aren't drones striking Libya still? Is that not hostilities?
I have two words for you: predator drones. You will never see it coming.
They are, and the president's report yesterday admitted that in sort of a parenthetical remark. But the War Powers Act, I have more and more respect for this law. It was written in 1973, and it specifically says this includes hostilities and military operations where the United States is a partner with other nations and acting in this sort of a role. It's in there. Read that law. To argue that it doesn't apply for reasons that the crafters of that law had the foresight to anticipate is just crazy. There's an intention here to enlarge presidential powers, to strip away congressional powers. And that's even down in writing in an amendment that's sitting in the Senate in a section of the Defense Authorization Act of 2012 that's sitting in the Senate like dozens of ticking time bombs of future wars waiting to become law. Presidents want, and this president is no exception, the power to make wars on their own.
So then why not more than 10 members of Congress that are really calling him on this in a dramatic way?
Well, that's an excellent question. I think there should be the full body. But, in other efforts in recent weeks, passing amendments denying funding in particular bills, denying U.S. ground troops, expressing their concerns and so forth, there have been huge numbers, majorities in the House of Representatives. But I think it would be plausible for the court to reply in this case. Congress can cut off the funding if it chooses. Congress can impeach if it chooses. That's not happened. The fact is the president is going around that and taking the money from the incredible slush fund in the Pentagon and the CIA and the secret budgets and Bush's innovation, allowing the presidents to transfer money secretly to secret budgets. This is out of control.
And you mentioned that a college student, when you were speaking, asked if you were being extreme to call this war illegal. And the point you made was that, illegal isn't some, ideological statement. You're talking about the law here. I'm curious what you think that says about the way the public now sees U.S. wars. The U.S., of course, being in a constant state of war now for 10 years.
Yeah, it's somehow impolite or radical to talk about wars as illegal, when that ought to be a more clear-cut question than whether a war is moral or desirable. Of course, we have a majority opposing our current wars in this country with no response out of Congress that's appropriate. But these wars are blatantly illegal, and the war in Libya is the most glaringly illegal war we've ever seen. Outdoes Clinton by far. Clinton at least had the money. Clinton didn't violate the 60-day limit and so forth. This is intentionally going around Congress and avoiding any appearance whatsoever of getting authorization from Congress. That's the intention here. And so the offense is intentional illegality.
But do you think that the government and the public don't really care anymore when it comes to laws and war?
That's why they gave President Barack Obama, right after he got into office, the Peace Prize. They knew that all these new wars were going to be launched, but that they would be called peace. This is Obama's global peace tour. First he's sold as this anti-war liberal. The planet bows down before him after 8 years of warmongering and lies about WMDs by George W. Bush. And then Obama launches new conflicts across the globe, but dubs them as humanitarian and bringing peace, and tells the world giant mushroom clouds and huge buildings being blown into pieces is not war, it is humanitarian liberation. And the controlled corporate dinosaur media said, you don't understand. These new wars are not wars. These are kinetic actions, and these are to bring peace. We were told Al-Qaeda were the good guys in the east of Libya going after Muammar Gaddafi. We were told that bombing their cities and killing thousands was humanitarian. And now we're told that a new war, peace action needs to be launched against Syria, and U.S. warships are waiting off the coast. Obama says he's concerned about what's happening in Sudan, and there might need to be a military bombardment there. Yemen is being carpet bombed by hundreds of Predator drones. And the media says, look at our peacemaker. He doesn't need Congress for authority. He has the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, last year at Bilderberg, and again just a few weeks ago at Bilderberg in St. Moritz in Switzerland, our sources who've been very accurate in the past have reported to us that this is part of a global destabilization program that is meant to lead to not just a multi-regional conflict, North Africa, Middle East, Central and South Asia, but to engulf China and Russia in destabilizing color revolutions. But the globalists won't stop there. They must destroy every nation state. They must destroy every currency. They must destroy every economy. So the entire world bows to this world government George Sorosian program of order out of chaos and the private global banking cartel that you will pay your carbon taxes to. It is happening. World War III is here. The whole world is going into crises. The domestic police state is unfolding against the people of our republic. We must take back Washington. We must take back our states. We must identify the fact that offshore private corporations have now hijacked our government and are using it as an instrument of global destabilization to bring in their world government on the ashes of our once free society. All of you Democrats that loved rebuking Bush for war, I certainly rebuked it as a constitutionalist, but all of you that thought it was trendy to be anti-war, now is the time to understand that we are at a serious crossroads and that Bush was only laying the groundwork for the next puppet that would come, Obama. Obama, the man of peace, the man of desolation, death, and destruction. This war that is about to engulf the world will be one of the most destructive, if not the most destructive in human history, and could lead to thermonuclear war. Please warn everyone you know. World War III is now upon us.